Is BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. We are bringing you continuing coverage of the latest breaking news, the developments, the reports that Iran is striking a US-run military base in Qatar. Let me run you through some of the details that we have, what we know right now and what we're still waiting for confirmation on. We know that Qatar closed its airspace, diverted planes away from it. We know that the reports are that the White House accepted that there were credible threats to this airbase, this US-run airbase. Then reports came through from AFP journalists initially of explosions over Doha. These are the live pictures over Doha, of course, the capital of Qatar. So just to remind you that this credible threat that was reported a short time ago is to the Al Udeid US-run airbase in Qatar. It's basically the biggest US-run airbase in the Middle East, in the region, and was seen as a likely, logical, potential target for Iran to retaliate against US forces after the US attack on its nuclear facilities over the weekend. So there had been receipts of a credible threat to this US airbase, and in the last few minutes, explosions heard over the capital, Doha. Let's take a look at these pictures from a little bit earlier, and let's take a listen as well. So those pictures were just from the last 20 minutes or so. We are back now to the live pictures just to explain the geography and the timing of all this. These are the live pictures of Doha, just gone 8 o'clock in the evening, as you can see there. And within the last 30 minutes, those pictures that we just ran showing those explosions being heard near Doha. Now, we understand that the credible threat was to the Al Udeid US-run airbase, not directly the civilian areas of Doha itself, but instead this US-run military airbase. Now, we understand precautionary effectively measures have been taken at this airbase. Planes potentially have flown out the way, and of course, defences at the ready. This comes after the shelter-in-place order for US citizens in Qatar a little earlier. And one new line to bring you just in the last couple of minutes, just since I've sat in the chair here and taken over from my colleague. Donald Trump, we understand from the Reuters news agency, citing CNBC, citing an admin official. Slightly convoluted there, but I just wanted to give you where we're getting this from. The line is this: Donald Trump is currently in the Situation Room with the Defense Secretary and the Joint Chiefs. So, Donald Trump currently in the Situation Room with the Defense Secretary and Joint Chiefs. That is from CNBC, American network, citing an official in the administration, getting to us here via the Reuters news agencies. Our team in the US will be following that up. So, if you have just joined us in the last few minutes, these are the live pictures that we are showing you right now over Doha. The reason being that explosions were heard over Doha. Potential credible threat was suspected at the Al Udeid US-run military base. It's the biggest US base in the Middle East, in the region, and was seen as a potential target for Iran to retaliate after those strikes when the US got involved over the weekend and, of course, hit those nuclear facilities. So all these developments reaching us in the last 20, 30 minutes or so. So let's just try and pause for breath for a moment. Now we've established the live pictures and we've established those pictures of the explosion that we have. Let's speak now to the BBC World Service, Nafisa Konova. So just bring us up to date, given what we've just been learning over the last few minutes of how things stand there where you are.
Luis, right now in Iraq also we heard and confirmed that Iraq's Al-Assad base, which housing US troops, has been attacked but apparently, according to sources that talk to us, two missiles were fired toward Ain al-Assad, which is the US's biggest base in Anbar province. And these two missiles, as our military sources are saying, has been intercepted. We still don't know that if this is the first wave of attack or this is all that Iran wanted to do, but we can confirm that Iran has carried out this attack, calling it's naming tidings of a victory. And it doesn't say more, Iran's news agencies, that what comes next, but they say that Iran simultaneously has attacked US bases in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and here in Iraq. It was expected. All these countries were in high alert, and this morning most American citizens in Qatar, they received first email from US embassy asking them to stay in sheltered area and not to come out until further notice. And then after that, a few hours after, officially the US embassy posted that warning on its X platform, and then that was followed by the UK warning to its British citizens in Qatar, asking the same precautionary step to take and stay in sheltered area. So step by step, hours by hours, we could feel in the region that is coming. But as I said, it is not clear that it is the whole thing that Iran wanted to do, or it is only the first wave. I remember in 2020 when the US killed Quds Forces commander, IRGC Quds Forces commander Qasem Soleimani here in Baghdad and assassinated him. Iran answered, retaliated by firing 2 or 3 waves of ballistic missiles towards Al-Assad Air Base and also Erbil Air Base housing US and coalition troops. So it can be expected that this is only the first wave, or it can be only the thing that Iran just wanted to send a message to the US that it can reach its bases.
On June 21, 2025, in an operation called Operation Midnight Hammer, the United States launched a coordinated air and sea strike targeting 3 key Iranian nuclear sites. 4 down Natanz and Isfahan. The strike involved 7 stealth B-2 bombers, dropping 14 massive ordnance penetrator, MOP bunker buster bombs. AUS submarine launching approximately 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles at Natanz and Isfahan. President Trump hailed the attack as a spectacular military success, asserting that the nuclear infrastructure had been completely and totally obliterated. Satellite imagery confirmed extensive surface damage at Fordow, including craters near ventilation shafts, though experts noted that direct destruction of underground centrifuge chambers may not yet be fully verified. The US warning to Iran do not retaliate. Before launching the strikes, both President Trump and Pentagon officials warned Tehran not to retaliate, stating that any counter-strike would provoke an even more forceful US response. This attempt to dissuade Iran underscored the hardline strategy: use overwhelming force to damage Iran's nuclear capability and prevent an Iranian counterattack via deterrence. Iran's retaliation, missile salvos on Al-Udeid Air Base execution of Operation Glad tidings of victory on June 23. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a salvo of short and medium-range ballistic missiles, targeting US military bases in the region including Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar as a direct response to the US attack on its nuclear facilities. Pre-attack coordination reports indicate Iran notified Qatar and the US Embassy via diplomatic channels hours in advance. leading to Qatar closing its airspace and the US Embassy advising Americans to take shelter. Satellite images also revealed a drawdown of US aircraft at Al Udeid, likely as a precaution. Successful interception. Qatari air defense systems reportedly intercepted all incoming missiles, resulting in no damage or casualties. The US also confirmed 0 American casualties or structural damage. The moral and strategic question: you can't beat a child and tell him not to cry. US officials had expected that their overwhelming strike would deter any Iranian response. However, Iran saw retaliation as their right, showcasing the limits of coercive deterrent. Iran framed the missile strike as a symbolic retaliation, carefully calibrated to avoid human harm. While asserting national dignity, their statement echoed the sentiment: you can't beat a child and then forbid him from crying. By warning first and coordinating to avoid civilian casualties, Iran aimed to uphold moral high ground and international law. Technical and defensive preparations. US military repositioning. Nearby B-52 and B-2 bombers were pulled back from Qatar ahead of the attack. Airspace closures. Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait and Iraq closed airspace, minimizing risk to civilian aircraft. Embassy shelter advisories. American citizens were alerted to stay indoors, and embassy access was restricted. Qatari Patriot missile systems successfully intercepted the missiles. Global reactions. Qatar strongly condemned Iran's strike as a violation of international law, but emphasized that the attack was targeted at US installations, not Qatar itself. Other Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain also condemned Iran's actions. Western governments, UK, France, Germany called for restraint and emphasized diplomacy. Russia accused the US of opening a Pandora's box, warning of a potential nuclear crisis. What happens next? Potential scenarios. Short-term de-escalation, with Iran demonstrating its capacity to retaliate, and the US halting further immediate strikes. We may have reached a temporary pause. Regional actors like Qatar could mediate, pushing for diplomacy rather than confrontation. Mid-term asymmetric and proxy actions. Even if direct conflict subsides, Iran may leverage proxy groups in Iraq, Syria, or Yemen to pressure US interests. The Strait of Hormuz remains a flashpoint, with possible disruptions to global energy markets. Geopolitical implications. Oil prices, tension spikes often lead to supply fears. GCC dynamics, Gulf nations may diversify security alignments between US, China, and Russia. US domestic politics. The Trump administration faces both support for decisive action and criticism for overshooting legal authority and risking war. Bottom line: deterrence with limits and diplomatic tightropes. The US demonstrated extraordinary military capability, but Iran's response undercut the assumption that force alone would silence Tehran. Iran's careful symbolic strike avoided mass casualties, but underlined that even a weaker power can assert agency, especially when coordinated with allies. The region now faces tenuous stability fueled by military threats and diplomatic chess. Escalation remains possible, though a broader war is looming uncertainly. In conclusion, the US attack and Iran's measured retaliation reflect a complex power play, one that merges overwhelming force with strategic frictions, moral posturing, and geopolitical risk. The next moves, including diplomacy or further strikes, will determine whether this spiral cools or flares into wider conflict.